everyone, I'm Jeremy Yudkin, and this is Tanglewood. Come on. Hello everyone, I'm Jeremy Yudkin, and you may have seen my videos during the Tanglewood season because I gave some talks about those special works that were on the Tanglewood Festival. But here we are now. It's fall in the Berkshires, and it's a little bit of a different scene. I'm here in Studio E of the Linde Center. Look at this magnificent room, and the space around it is really remarkable. In one corner, we can see Ozawa Hall, that gorgeous concert hall for chamber music that's used during the summer, right there. There are other buildings in the Linde Center, as this area is called. This is the newest and latest addition to the magnificent Tanglewood campus. On the outside, you can see those extraordinarily beautiful oak trees. They're red oaks, and they are right in front of where the performers sit or stand, so the audience can see them behind the musicians. What a wonderful idea. And the architect for the Ozawa Hall is the same one who designed this little area here. So called the Linde Center because the benefactor who was so generous with the BSO was called Joyce Linde. And the Linde Center is comprised of several buildings. This is the main one, which has this lovely concert hall, and the building curves around to the side there to a delightful café, which has seating both indoors and outdoors. Of course, that's a very beautiful summer venue. Then it has two other smaller buildings, the Volpe Studio and the Gordon family studio, both of which are rehearsal rooms. This is the principal concert hall for the Linde Center. It's called Studio E, not because there are 4 other studios with alphabetical letters, but because E stands for Edward, the husband of Joyce Linde, and she decided to name this lovely place after him. It's bare now because there isn't a concert coming immediately, but over there, the back windows, you can see those chairs, and also behind it, a system of risers that fills up this whole area with a steep rake up to the bottom of that window, so every seat in Studio A is a good seat. What we have here is the culmination of the Boston Symphony Orchestra's ideal of making concerts and music here at Tanglewood available throughout the non-Tanglewood months. That is to say, from the fall to the spring, when the orchestra itself is not here at Tanglewood. And this was an idea developed some years ago and horribly derailed by COVID, but ultimately brought to fruition gradually over the years and fully this year, 2025 to 26. We have an extraordinary array of concerts with a vast range from classical music to international music to jazz and all kinds of other things. So I'm going to introduce you in this video to the fall programs that are coming up between October and December. There are so many different kinds of music going to be here, and it starts with classical music. Now, if you're a musician in the Boston Symphony Orchestra and you play a stringed instrument, you're sitting in a big section of people, other people all playing the same instrument, and you are never heard by yourself. But all of these people who play strings in the Boston Symphony Orchestra are brilliant musicians and worthy of being soloists in their own right. So there is a certain tension between being a great musician and being an orchestral musician, where you have to sit with a group of other people and do exactly what you're told by the conductor or your section leader. And all of these people have ambitions greater than that. So this program at the Linde Center gives them an opportunity to play chamber music when they are heard by themselves. So one of the series at the Linde Center here is classical chamber music. In October and November, we have a group of musicians from the BSO playing chamber music. The first one is of string players, 6 string players from the BSO, playing first of all a new piece by a Mexican woman composer called Gabriela Ortiz, who was featured during this last festival during the summer. That's a string quartet, which is a wonderful piece that alternates between dreamy music and lively Mexican rhythms. The second piece is a string sextet. That is the richest possible combination of string instruments you can imagine. 2 violins, 2 violas, 2 cellos, all playing together, and a piece by Dvorak, which represents the richness of those 6 instruments, 2 of each, and shows off the styles and colors of Czech music. This is one of the early pieces of Dvorak that tended to bring in the sounds of his native Bohemia, it was called then, ultimately became part of Czechoslovakia, and now called the Czech Republic. That should be a lovely concert. Later on, we have a recital by a guitarist. Now, that instrument goes back a long way to the Baroque period, but it's always been called a Spanish guitar because in Spain, the music for guitar was highly developed, and we often hear Spanish music on it. So we're getting a solo classical guitarist who is actually French, but playing Spanish music and Latin American music for solo guitar, a wonderful program. And you can hear, from my voice, you can hear the lovely acoustics in this room. So you can imagine, if I can just do this, and you can hear that sound so clearly, you can imagine hearing the sound of a single Spanish guitar in here. You'd be able to hear it clearly from the very back of the room. The third classical music concert in November is the film Bach and Friends, which will be presented by Eugene Drucker. Now, Eugene Drucker was one of the violinists in the Emerson String Quartet, which had a 40-year career, became one of the best known and most famous and accomplished American string quartets, recorded almost everything in the repertoire for Deutsche Grammophon, and they have just recently disbanded. But Eugene Drucker has taken on lots of other roles now. He has become the artistic director of Berkshire Bach. And Berkshire Bach is an organization that presents music of Bach, of course, but also music of other Baroque composers. The movie Bach and Friends interviews people who are intimately involved with playing Bach and their thoughts about that. Amazingly, in addition to the film, which will be introduced by Eugene Drucker, he will play a piece with a live performance with the pianist, a very accomplished pianist, Simone Dienestein, and talk about their own relationship to Bach's music. Later in November, there will be a chamber concert with 3 stringed instruments, 3 players from the BSO get to play on their own, with Jonathan Bass, wonderful young pianist, who will be joining them. There'll be 2 pieces, both of them extremely interesting pieces. One by Charles Ives, whose main livelihood was being an insurance agent and who composed music on the side, but was an extremely original American composer, wanted to bring in the traditions of American folk song, and especially of New England hymn singing and gospel singing, into his classical music. And they'll be playing, therefore, his String Quartet number 1, which is full of quotations from gospel music and camp meeting music and hymns. Remarkably, it was written in 1896 when Charles Ives was still a sophomore at Yale University. The second piece on the program is by Amy Beach. Amy Beach was born in New Hampshire and was almost entirely self-taught. She actually gave a concert when she was 16. Then later, a couple of years later, she married Dr. Henry Harris Aubrey Beach, H.H.A. Beach, a physician who was 25 years older than she was. During her lifetime, she was known not as Amy Beach, but by the moniker Mrs. H.H.A. Beach, as many women, married women, were in those days. So her compositions were credited to H.H.A. Beach. After her husband died, she reverted to her own name, Amy Beach, and published a lot of music under her own name. She was the first American woman to write a symphony and publish a symphony called the Gaelic Symphony, and ultimately she became known as one of America's leading composers. The piece of hers that's going to be played on this program is a piano quintet. That's a piano with string instruments, and it's extremely expressive and emotionally intense, even when it's also somehow mysterious and dark. The last movement has a lot of drive and force, and unfortunately in this country we still don't know enough about American composers of the early 20th century. I encourage you to become familiar with these 2 works. Let me make a distinction here between the Tanglewood Learning Institute and the Linde Center. The Tanglewood Learning Institute, abbreviated by those in the know as TLI, is the organization that runs things at the Linde Center. The Linde Center is the physical space that we've been examining, and TLI is the organization that puts on the concerts. It has, especially in the last couple of years, begun to focus on jazz, and there'll be 3 concerts of jazz here at the Linde Center over the next couple of months in October and November. First, in October, is Emmett Cohen, who was born in Miami, Florida, has a Master of Music from the Manhattan School of Music, and is a widely successful jazz pianist touring with his own trio, and he's made several recordings. The latest album was named Downbeat Magazine's Album of the Year for 2024. And his trio will be welcoming Georgia Hears, who's a guest vocalist from South Carolina, who's performed in many prominent jazz clubs in New York, as well as the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. Importantly, I think it's important to note that this concert is also a celebration of our local jazz organization here in the Berkshires. It's called Berkshires Jazz, which has been a promoter, supporter, and advocate for jazz in the Berkshires now for 20 years. And so this concert will be a celebration of Berkshires Jazz, their 20th anniversary. And before the concert, there'll be a reception honoring Berkshire Jazz with hors d'oeuvres, drinks, a video retrospective, and memorabilia of Berkshire's jazz events over the past 2 decades. In November, we'll have Ulysses Owen and the Generation Y Band. Ulysses Owen is one of those people who is a drummer, but runs his own band, and he has been described as a drummer who takes a back seat to no one. Well, of course, drummers are in the back seat of a group, but still, he is a wonderful musician, and he's in the tradition of drummers who run jazz bands. It seems like an odd thing. It's almost always a soloist who seems to be in charge. Coltrane or Davis or Louis Armstrong. They were the soloists, but here the drummer is running the group. He books the gigs, he chooses his companions, and he's a very exciting performer. He has toured in support of his new album, called one of the best albums of 2024, and they've played in Japan, in Canada, and at the Monterey Jazz Festival. That's Ulysses Owens Jr. and the Generation Y Band. Generation Y, also called millennials, are those who are sort of in their 30s and 40s now. And Generation Y is, of course, another way of saying millennials. Finally, towards the end of November, the great jazz pianist, arranger, composer, organizer, impresario of jazz, Ted Rosenthal, will be coming with his trio to play a concert he calls Classics Reimagined. He's a superbly virtuosic pianist, plays with extreme clarity, which betrays his classical training as a pianist, but he applies this great skill to playing jazz. He rearranged classical music, and those of us who know classical music will enjoy hearing and trying to identify Chopin, Rachmaninoff, Brahms, and Schubert in those arrangements that he makes. He has also a guest soloist, Anat Cohen, who's a clarinetist, who'll be joining the trio for that concert. Classics Reimagined. And finally, in December, Stella Cole, who, interestingly, in this 21st century jazz scene, there are singers who have decided to replicate the sound of the American great songbook, who like to imitate or recall, let us say, the sounds of the great jazz singers of the greater American songbook, like Sinatra, or in the case of women, Ella Fitzgerald. And she will be doing a concert of the Great American Songbook, Stella Cole, in December. Amidst all of this wonderful stuff, there are some very unusual concerts. One is film music for string quartet. So there's a string quartet called Catalyst Quartet, and they're going to be playing a concert that they call Cinematic Refuge, which will be playing film scores, especially those that wrote music for motion pictures that have to do with the ideals of freedom, free speech, and liberation from oppression. There's one concert, one group that I call uncategorizable. We might call it hip, modern, classical music. This is got to be such a great concert. It's by a group, 4 young guys who call themselves Sandbox Percussion. Sandbox Percussion has been described as exhilarating by the New York Times and mesmerizing by the paper. They've won Grammy nominations, and they play all kinds of percussion. Now, let me explain about percussion. You'd think it's just people banging on things, but actually percussion instruments can also be melodic. So if you think about it, a xylophone or a marimba are also percussion because you hit them, but they play melodies. In fact, if you think about it, the piano is actually a percussion instrument because you're hitting the keys are hitting a lever, and the lever are hitting the strings. So it's a very sophisticated percussion, but it is nonetheless percussion. Of course, there are also drums and cymbals and various other things, and Sandbox Percussion likes to bring in very unusual instruments, including a brake drum from an old car, which makes its own special sound, and with which they get an amazing array of sounds. This should be terrific. They have made important film scores, they've done albums, and they are all on the faculty of the Peabody Institute, the Musical Institute at Johns Hopkins University. Finally, there are children's programs, family programs, which of course include children. In October, there's a children's concert of music and movement and storytelling. Children are encouraged to stand here and run around here on the stage. They have a storyteller, beatboxer, and rapper whose name is Bubba Israel, and a sound artist who's an expert with electronic sounds called Sean Noel. There's a contemporary dancer, there's a hip-hop dancer, and this performance is especially designed for children, so bring all the kids you can think of. Towards the end of December, the BSO brings their brass players, all those great brass players you see at the back of the orchestra, trumpets, trombones, tubas, French horns, who will be establishing a new holiday tradition here in the Berkshires. They're called BSO Holiday Brass, and they'll be playing all kinds of Christmas music and other seasonal music, especially for families. There'll be decorations, treats, great music, and the occasional surprise. So again, bring the whole family and celebrate Christmas here at the Linde Center at Tanglewood. Again, this is Professor Jeremy Yudkin. I'm Professor of History of Music at Boston University, but I love to be here at Tanglewood as much as I can, and to celebrate the fact that we finally have a year-round program here at the Linde Center to supplement and complement the great music that goes on during the Tanglewood Festival in July and August. And I hope that you will be able to attend some of these concerts here at the Linde Center. I shall do another video to introduce you to the music of the second half of the season from January to April. Thank you, and have a good time.